Hi guys, Cultured Khun here. I'm too excited for this one. I've been looking forward to talking about this one. So, on the last installment of Afro Saxon Part 1, Coconut Kun, I had briefly introduced the idea of being an Afro Saxon. So, I'd first laid the foundation of what it means to be an African, at least traditionally or historically. Then, on top of that layer, I'd added being a Saxon, particularly an Anglo Saxon, the descendants of those who were conquered by the Germanic people, the Saxons, who went to the Anglos and then made Anglo Saxons. And so this brings me to the point of social study. So today is going to be part analysis, part commentary, part sociology, part anthropology, part history, part philosophy. But I mainly want to discuss, dissect, and deliberate on views, value systems, and how those permeate to the people we are today. So, Afro Saxon. Now that we know what one is, how do we spot them? What behaviors do they exhibit? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they believe in? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they dress? Let's start with how they think. Let's talk about the aesthetics, the function, and the cost of their mindset. So, cosmetically, how do they look? How do they think about how they look? And how does that affect their perception of the world? I want to start with cogito ergo sum. Cogito, I think, ergo sum, I am. So I think, therefore I am. And this is an internalized European ideology to do with the sovereignty of the individual. They place the center of the community as the individual. And the idea of the sovereign individual is that each person is personally responsible for that person, for themselves in the society. But as Africans, we believe in Ubuntu. We come from Abantu, Bantu speaking people. Abantu means people. Ubuntu, I am because you are. And that speaks to the symbiotic relationship between self and society. We believe that self is sustained by society and society is sustained by self. They feed on each other. So the idea of an African is that an African is strong because of the community. An African lives for the community. An African is the community. Amongst your body, the corpus, there is a community of cells. And if it goes even further, the community of people make up a village. A community of constituencies make up a district. A community. So that there's that group mindset. And the group is the first and foremost point of action, analysis, and adoption as far as Africans self-actualizing themselves in society. So now when we look at how the idea of cogito ergo sum or Ubuntu from Abantu translates, and the cognitive dissonance, because there's a clash. One is focusing on group, one is focusing on the individual. The white people focus on individual, the brown, black people focus on the group. And how what you found is that with time, over the years, we have lost that tangible feel of community. Ever since colonization, you find that a lot of Africans are self-driven. They're self-conscious, they're self-aware, and they're woke. One could argue they're asleep. And they're asleep to the traditions of old. They're asleep to the history. They're asleep to the philosophy. So you see, Ubuntu, social wisdom, speaks to our rich history and the tapestry from which we all strung together the stories of our lives. And all activities primarily before were for the group, for the benefit of the group, for the benefit of your family, your village, your neighborhood, your community, your society, your constituency. And that model then extrapolates itself onto later life. But with the introduction of English and the English lifestyle and the European way of thinking, you've found more Africans adopt that mindset. And now this is broken down on a social level, how we interact with each other. Because for one, you find that we used to organize in tribes. Tribes were groups of clans. Clans were groups of families. The base unit of a society is the family. From the family of a home, in a community of homes, you have a village or a neighborhood. Beyond that is the community. So when you have the shared values of that community, of that village, of that neighborhood, of that home, of that family, broken down by the individualistic ideology which translates into your actions and the things you say and the things you believe about yourself, you then have the disintegration of our primary knowledge of Ubuntu. I hope you follow. So now that we've painted the picture, we've laid the foundation of how it is Africans, Anglo-Saxons think, and how Afro Saxons have this disparity because they have a dichotomy of the two groups, the two faith systems, the two value systems of society, of life, of living, and their limitations. We then also bring into play cosmetics. So for most of you, you wear clothes, you wear shoes, you wear undergarments, you cut your hair, you wear wigs, you wear weaves, you put on makeup. A lot of these standards of beauty are Eurocentric. And that's because for a long time, the golden standard for us was the colonizer. And I don't put out this message to be anti-white because I'm pro-black or pro-indigenous African knowledge systems. But this is the truth. Because even me right now, I am wearing a white tee. I usually get my hair cut. Even my own standards of beauty and cosmetics, I could argue, are quite Western, quite Anglo-American for that case. So moving beyond that, it speaks to how deep the colonial scars are. Because for one, we had our own sense of fashion, we had our own tradition, we had our own culture, we had our own colors, we had our own rich diversity in how we dress ourselves and how we move about. We had function for the clothes we wore, we had aesthetics, and we knew the costs that were environmentally friendly. But now we live in a world where we all look uniform, we're all trying to mirror the Western man or woman. And even with our nuclear families, we mirror that structures now, so more so now due to the rural to urban migration. Because in villages, there was this idea of an extended family. So your family wouldn't simply be mom, dad, children, but mom, dad, granny, grandpa, auntie, uncle, cousin, so and so. And we move through that. And family before would have been an institution. It would have been a place you seek guidance from. Elders were there and were believed to have sat with their grandchildren for counsel. Whenever you wanted to learn something about someone or something, you'd go to an elder. And even the way we pass knowledge was different from the way it is now. So with the advancement and the push of civilization through the Western lens, you find we've lost a lot of these secrets of our society. And it weren't necessarily secrets in that they were unattainable, but the open secrets in that you had to be inducted into these ways of life, into these lifestyles. Correct? Another thing I want to talk about is religion, following what I've just laid. So religion pairs really well with Ubuntu. And the reason why is because when you focus on the group, when you focus on those of you who share common values, who are bound by doctrine, by those shared beliefs, and want to defend that faith, you find that Africans are susceptible to believing what they're told. And for the most part, Africa is or has taken on board the three major Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. For the most part, Islam and Christianity. And what you found is we have eroded some of our traditional practices due to adopting the foreign system of Christianity. Before we were Christian, we had our own indigenous knowledge systems. Africans were spiritual way before we were introduced to the idea of a Christian God or Christ. And what you'll find if you research, if you ask, if you just dive a little deeper into your circles, you'll find that as you unearth the truth of what it means to be an African, the truth of what really happened during colonialism, that there are so many skeletons of what your ancestors formerly believed. There's so many skeletons of what your ancestors fought for, died for in many cases. And you are unaware of this because to the victor goes the spoils. as written in history. And I want to talk about religion because it is, in part, a regime which is oppressed or oppressive and oppressed many Africans. Because first came missionaries. At least I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what happened with colonialism. First came the missionaries who brought God. Then came merchants who brought good and trade. Then came mercenaries who brought guns, bullets, and militarily occupied our lands. So colonialism first occurred with the mind, then the body, then the soul. So they'd tricked you into believing that your knowledge systems were irrelevant, your knowledge systems were inferior, when that may not have been the case. And you find that you've whitewashed many of your customs, traditions, values, and beliefs because of that. And you find that many Africans believe in a God they don't even know why. Many Africans experience this cognitive dissonance, this discomfort, because you know that there's a spirit calling you to something higher, but you also know there's this doctrine being imposed on you by the systems which govern your life. In school, God is mentioned, but the Christian God. In social media, God is mentioned, but the Christian God. And when you ask about your ancestors, for some of you, your parents might even dismiss those questions. For some of you, your grandparents, with names such as Margaret, Mary, Beauty, Rhoda, Susan, even have English names and support the English system of belief. And now this is not to say Christianity is inherently English, but the people who brought it to us, the people who popularized it for the most part, were English. And if you think I am making up wish-wash, just ask which is the most commonly read version of the Bible and which language it is in. I'm sure even if you check your own home for the religious text of the Bibles, the extra biblical narratives, it will be in English. Your modus operandi for understanding God, the God you pray to, you pray in an English tongue. And so this is some of how deep the socialization of the Afro Saxon runs. Because you have the skin, you have the melanin, you have the cosmetics, you have the basic functions, biologically at least, of an African. But the software is un-African to the deepest level because it was programmed that way. You were indoctrinated into the ideas which weren't yours. And these were the ideas which suppressed, oppressed, and minimized your ancestors. Correct? Now I'm going to speak more openly and more broadly in the videos to come about the lasting effects of colonialism and how that has affected me being an Afro Saxon. So in the next few videos, I'm going to talk about the economics, the environment, and the politics of an Afro Saxon. But today I just wanted to brief you guys on some of the sociology of how we move, because how we do family nowadays is mirroring that of a Saxon. But because we wear the skin of an African, it is now Afro Saxon, and you see the connection. Because I'm trying to unpack a lot of the propaganda which is promoted and pushed onto us. I'm trying to resolve some of the deeper questions I've had, some of the questions I've had for my whole life. Because it is very painful. It's a painful process knowing that you don't know who you are. You don't know where you come from. You don't know why we do certain things. Why do we celebrate marriage the way we do? Why is it, as Africans, we have 3 weddings, as opposed to Europeans who have 1 or 2, which is a civil agreement? Why do you have a traditional wedding, a white wedding, and a civil signing? 3, you're married by state, you're married in church, and you're married by culture. Why is that? Does that not already speak to the conflict of interest of the value systems being imposed on you from birth? Why is it when I'm thinking or conceptualizing ideas of who I am, I'm thinking in English, I'm dreaming in English, I'm speaking English? Why is it when I speak to my children or potential children that I will be teaching them in English and I will be unable to draw from the repository of resources that being knowledge, wealth, and information to share with my own? Why is that? And the reason for that is because in most part, we are still feeling the searing effects of colonialism. And this is to break the mold, to declassify the information which was termed taboo for the longest time. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will expand on a lot that I've mentioned today, but in the video subsequent to this. So I hope you have a good one. Kultured Khun out. Stay blessed.